There's always a lot of cool crafts that I see on Pinterest that I try to make with the kids when they come for their OT sessions. But as we know with kids, they never come out as predicted. Oftentimes you have to modify along the way. They almost never look exactly like the picture because the person who made it was maybe a little bit more of an artist than I am, or that the kids who come to see me are. But what I try to do is make sure that I'm picking crafts that are going to be manageable for the kids that I'm working with so that they can feel successful, so that they can walk away with a finished product that they can be proud of, as well as doing an activity that builds their ability to use two hands together, that builds their coordination skills, that really helps them learn how to plan and execute a craft activity, because a lot of my kids really struggle with that planning and sequencing part of the task, sometimes even more than the scissor skills or the drawing skills or the lacing skills or any of the other fine motor, visual motor type things that we talk about in occupational therapy. So today I'm going to show you a Christmas lacing craft that is pretty easy. It's something that you can modify to be easier or harder depending on the shape that you choose to do the lacing activity with. Now, the things you're going to need for this craft are some different color holiday themed paper. I recommend extra long legal size if you can find it, but if you can't, it's totally fine to tape two smaller regular size pieces together. That's what we did in our craft because we didn't have a big piece of paper. Some scissors, some yarn, and some decorative materials that could be glitter, stickers, paint, dot art pens, markers, anything like that that you can use to really make this craft your own and make sure it shows off your interests and your design talents. You also want to make sure that you have something like tissue paper handy. Hopefully you have a lot of that laying around as you're wrapping presents and whatnot for the holidays. If not, you can also use just regular tissue paper or newspaper, or anything else that you have lying around your house that's easy to crumble up and stuff into the craft that we're going to make today. I'm going to show you the Christmas tree version of this craft, but then at the end of the video, I'm also going to show you two other variations that are a little bit simpler in terms of cutting so that you can make a good choice about what's going to be a best fit for your child based on their cutting skills and ability to participate in the steps of making the craft. So let's get started. I want to show you first, this is what our Christmas tree looked like when it was done. Obviously, not like the picture exactly, but that's okay because when you're an artist, you can always put your own slant on things. And that's one thing that I do try to reinforce with kids is that it doesn't have to look exactly like the picture. No two artists are alike. And as long as it reflects you and your design abilities and your personality, it's okay for you to make something that's slightly different than the craft that you're trying to copy. So the first thing that we did is that I put some dots on a piece of paper and had the girl that I was working with connect the dots in such a way that it formed a Christmas tree. You can see I had to take two pieces of paper and tape them together. That's a great opportunity to practice working with tape because I do find that tape is not a common part of a lot of arts and crafts, and it's something that my kiddos that I work with tend to struggle with. Now, after you've got the dots set up, after you've connected the dots to make the general shape of the Christmas tree that you're making, the next step is cutting it out. Now, luckily, the girl that I was working with knows how to turn the paper. It's definitely harder the more turns that you have to make. So make sure that you make a good decision on which shape you're going to choose for the Christmas craft so that the child can be successful. I really like to use straight lines for kids that have more trouble turning the page, and then I might help them turn the paper for that little in cut, and then readjust again to help them cut down the next long line of the Christmas tree. You'll notice we didn't add a tree trunk because that also makes it a little bit more complicated in terms of cutting. So you're going to need 2 pieces of paper to cut out the tree so that you have a front and back part that you can lace together. Now, if you can't cut it all out at once, then I would cut one, trace it, and then cut out the second tree. It may be that you're going to share this activity with your child and you cut one tree while they cut the other, just because if they do struggle with cutting, it's a lot of work to cut out 2 trees. Now, after you've got both sides of your tree cut, you're going to use the hole puncher to punch around the edges, about maybe 1.5 inches or 2 inches apart if you don't feel like you need a whole lot of holes. For this particular craft, it ended up that I did most of the hole punching because, let's be honest, those single hole punchers are really, really hard to squeeze. So unless you have a child that has really good hand strength, it's going to be tricky to try to get them to do those little hole punches. This might be the moment where mom steps in and the child, maybe puts their hand on top of yours and then helps you squeeze it down by squeezing your hand. That would be a good way to help them participate without the frustration of not being able to do the hole punch itself. Now we're going to move on to the lacing part of the activity. And I find it's best just to put a little piece of tape around the bottom of the yarn so that it doesn't unravel. And then you can go through the lacing process. Make sure if you have to model up and down, or if you have to show your child how to flip the paper back and forth so that they can see the next hole that they're going into, definitely take a moment to do that so that your child can feel successful. Maybe you're going to do half of the lacing and they'll do the other half. I know for this particular session, we started out with the girl that I was working with only wanting to do 1/2, but the more success she experienced, the more motivated she was to go all the way around the tree until we got to the other side. Now leave a little bit of a hole that isn't laced together so that you can put in the tissue paper. I decided that it probably would be a better idea to decorate the Christmas tree before we stuffed it, because sometimes when you stuff things, it gets a little lumpy and bumpy and makes it a little bit harder to decorate and put all the objects on that you're interested in. For us, we just used dot art so that we could do some different color ornaments on the tree. She decided that she wanted to do layers of colors as opposed to mixing them all around. I think, be creative. This is a time where your child can really kind of show their personality in the craft that they're making to make it more their style. Then next we move on to the tissue paper, and we just took smaller pieces to crunch up, not too tight so that it would really kind of fluff up the tree, and then pushed it all the way up to the top of the tree first with the opening left at the bottom, just so that it would be easier to stuff and less likely to come unraveled as we were stuffing. We still got a little looseness at the bottom, but it actually worked out okay. We just took, again, these smaller chunks of tissue paper, stuffed them in, kind of squished it together every once in a while to see if we needed any more tissue. And then once we got to a place where we thought it looked puffy enough, then tried to close it up and stitch the rest of the yarn so that we could get a nice closure. We had to work together to tie the knot because that wasn't an area that the girl that I was working with was as proficient at. It was a team approach, and our Christmas tree came out great. Now, these are the 2 other options. You can either do a stocking shape or a gingerbread man shape. And what I'll say is, hopefully you can tell that the stocking shape does not really have a lot of twists and turns. There's not a lot of rotating of the paper. So that can be a really good match for a younger child. You really just need a gradual curve to go around the foot of the stocking. So if you have a child that's not that great at turning the paper, this is a good option because you can just cut straight for most of it and then guide their arm a little bit, maybe with their elbow, to be able to make it around the curve. If they're not quite ready for that, then maybe you're gonna do the curve and they're just gonna do the straight edges. The most complicated shape is going to be the gingerbread man. You can see that there's a lot of smaller curves, there's a lot of twists and turns, there's some sharp turns, there's some gradual turns. This is what we call a multivariant figure. And when you have a multivariant figure that has a lot of different types of movement that you have to do when you're cutting, that's going to be much more complicated than the stocking or the Christmas tree. So you know your child best, you know their cutting skills the best. You can choose to make any of these objects larger or smaller depending on your child's cutting skills and abilities. And I really hope that this is a fun craft that you can do this holiday season to stay in the Christmas spirit. If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel for even more videos around craft activities that you can do with your children, and share this video with anybody who you think might be interested and is looking for holiday crafts this season that build fine motor skills, but also help you celebrate the season with your child.